I love it. I love it, Chapo. I love it. Hello, 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 and welcome to Shared Space with Quida and Chap. We are going to get into some awesome announcements. And let me introduce myself. I always forget to do that. Hello, I'm Laquita Chansey, the founder and director of Baltimore Homes, and we build micro shelters and tiny homes for folks who are unhoused right here in Baltimore. And Chapo, tell us about yourself. Who are you, sir?
I am Chaplain Lovelace. I am Quida's biggest fan. Here we are, unapologetic. And I'm privileged to do host shared space with her Monday nights at 7 on BlackUSA.News.
I love it. I love it. And thanks, Donnie, for that. He had an awesome event this weekend that
Yes.
I went to. We saw Monique was there. One of my great friends, Rashad, was there. He works with some youth, some familiar faces, because, Donnie's always bigging up Black businesses. So thank you for that. And as always, thank you to Donnie Glover for sharing his platform.
That's
So,
right.
Chapo, what type of announcements do you have for us today, bro?
Well, you mentioned Monique. So her big announcement, after being I don't want to put her age out there, but being a Jane Doe for a very long time, the new state of New York provided a birth certificate for her. She discovered that her name was Cymbeline Ruffin. So congratulations, Miss Ruffin. She knows her name. She
Wow.
knows who she is, where she's from, how old she is, and her birthday was May 11th. So her and I think Miss Nicole Nosey Taylor and another young lady went up to New York with her, got her birth certificate, and they celebrated the other about a week or two ago. So that's been really huge. If you follow her story, if you Google known as Monique or watch any of her documentaries, her journey has come full circle, and it's probably the most exciting thing that's happened this year in Baltimore. Honestly, we're all excited for Monique. So Miss Ruffin, um, we also have the guys let me out the gate today. We've been holding back on us trying to. We're doing a Battle of the Bands marching band parade down the Inner Harbor on August 20th. The bands will start at Pier 6. They will march through the harbor and end up at Rash Field where we're holding Power Fest. Um, so everything in order. I've been itching to like tell everybody and send flyers out and start gathering all the resources. So today's the day we really started hitting that hard. We'll share a flyer in a little bit for that. But we are looking for marching bands for the competition. We're looking for dance groups for a competition. Um, I believe we have a stage, but if somebody has a stage with a roof on it that they want to donate, we'll take it. We're looking for vendors, food vendors, any kind of vendors that want to participate. Your proceeds will go towards cash prizes for the marching bands. Um, what else do we have? Any community groups who want to be present and share your resources and your organization in the community with Baltimore City that day, just reach out to me. My information will be on the flyer. We'll make sure you have a free 10 by 10 spot for nonprofits and community organizations. And then Sunday, actually, this past Sunday and next Sunday, I made it to a fantastic, relaxing family vibe walk around Lake Montebello with Laquita Chansey and Voltrina. So I'll let you share about that.
Yes, thank you for that. So we are collectively calling ourselves Voltrina, the collective. But yeah, every Sunday, 9 a.m., except for Mother's Day and Father's Day, we are out there at the lake, walk with a doc, just walk, a weekly wellness walk. And quite frankly, we talk about mental health and wellness. We do a mindfulness exercise, do some community connections, and yeah, walk around the lake and make sure that we move and groove with folks. And
Uh,
that, what? Go ahead.
no, I was just going to comment like, if you haven't been or you don't know, it is really a significant catalyst for other things being organized in the community. People share ideas, they share what the work they do, who they are, and then people start showing up at other people's events. They start, collaborating and participating. So it's really been unique watching the community kind of get knit together a little tighter because of something simple like a walk and a talk.
Right, but it's necessary. Like we always share space And that is how I met today's guest, this dope Black woman who is, and you know what? I'm going to double check with Camille and make sure that that's how she identifies. Because you know what? Miss Camille Cipollone, we need to double check and make sure that we aren't putting folks in boxes that they don't want to be in. Okay. But Camille, like, welcome, Miss
Thank
Museum
you.
Extraordinaire. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Chap and Quida, for having me on here today. My name is Camille. I do use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am so happy to be here today. First and foremost, before I go into sort of what I do in the community and what my work is, I want to just really reiterate and plug what Quida and Chap were talking about with Walk with the Doc. My husband and I have been going to Walk with the Doc for a few months now, probably since maybe May. And we've just really been enjoying it. The community connections that we make there are incredible. That's how I met Quida. That's how I met Chap. And I'm getting to know them even more, including with tonight's podcast. So I'm having a really great time there. And it really fuels a lot of the community work that so many people do. There's so many people around Baltimore City that we don't know what they're doing in the community, but there's so many people who are doing so many wonderful things. And I just thank you all so much for that space. And I thank Voltrina for that space every week, except for Mother's Day and Father's Day, but every Sunday, going to Lake Montebello and just really getting to know each other. And it's just one walk around the lake, but it really is an impactful, about an hour and a half. And it's really impactful and has really made my time in Baltimore a lot more meaningful and a lot more fulfilling.
I love
So
that. Thank
thank
you,
you all.
Camille.
Fills up the hope tanks.
Right. Let me grab a tissue.
So I guess for me, the reason that I'm here today is that I just wanted to share a little bit about myself and my work. My husband and I have been living in Baltimore since 2015. I'm originally from Maryland, but I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland. So I came here after graduating college. And I am really into just kind of my whole life, really since high school, racial equity work. I graduated with my undergraduate degree in political science and Spanish, learning more about racial equity work with a minor in Africana studies. And then I went on to do my graduate work at an HBCU at Morgan State University. So I also want to plug Morgan State, which is a wonderful school for graduate school to go to. And I got my degree in African American studies there just last year, actually. It feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. With that, I have gone into museum work and learning history and doing history kind of out loud and in public has been kind of my passion project for my whole life. And I've kind of found a way to make a career out of it through museums. But one thing that I've learned in sort of my career so far, kind of working in museums since around 2018. Since then, I've learned that museums, and I'm sure a lot of us already know, are very white spaces. And sometimes that means that they're very unwelcoming. And sometimes it feels like maybe you don't belong, right? So especially in a city like Baltimore, I want to make sure that every museum here is frequented by Baltimore City residents, folks who have been in Baltimore City for a long time and their families have been here, and people who can feel welcome in spaces that are really representing their culture and their history. So with that, what I do is I'm currently a museum registrar and a collections manager. So what that means is that I deal with all of the records for the museum collections, as well as intake collections, take in loans, do outgoing loans, as well as kind of connect with new collections that we want to get into the museum. So one of my goals as in that role is to get as much racial equity and racial accessibility in museums around like all of Maryland.
Right.
I want to share that with you all today and kind of hear what Quida and Chap think. And then I also just want to kind of share a little bit about what my goals are in terms of how I'm planning on getting there.
Right, right. Well, Camille, I want to commend you for saying that you realized that there was some sort of racial disparity, like in high school. that isn't always the case. That you recognize that in your own environment and how to get involved. You know what I mean? Like you might recognize it because, this is America, right? Like we're not
Right.
silly, but it's like, well, where do we start? This is so frustrating.
Right.
So I love that. And then it's brought you this far. So I'm not going to go too far back. I do want to shout out Quandra Gaines, who said that
Mhm.
that is the best place to go. It sounds like you two went to the same undergrad. I think that's when she put that comment up there. So, there's always love for higher education if that's
Yeah.
your thing, but we don't have to put people in boxes. Whatever
No,
works for
not at
you
all.
is what works for you, right? But to your point, Camille, like I think it is so dope about what you do because I was saying, I think it would be awesome if we could get our micro shelters in different museums around Baltimore. Like you put the idea in my head about all of Maryland, and I'm like, wait, all of Maryland? That's crazy, girl. But just right here in Baltimore, the Visionary Arts Museum,
Right.
and using that. So thank you for your help on putting a proposal together, sharing a template. Like your expertise is really helpful. So I guess without talking about specific museums or projects that
Mhm.
you've been on, like how did you start to get into this whole world of being even recognized as you applied for jobs and
Yeah.
like how did this start?
That's a great question. So, Quita, I also want to go back to your previous point just about how I was able to sort of recognize this kind of disparity in high school.
Right.
And it's interesting because for me, I think the biggest thing for me is I come from a very unique background, right? I feel like, uh, so I grew up in Section 8 housing, in Montgomery County. So Montgomery County is definitely one of the wealthiest counties in America, not just Maryland. But there is still Section 8 housing there, right? So I did grow up in a poor community. But then at the same time, because of the sheer amount of resources that Montgomery County itself has, I was able to go to private school my whole life. So interestingly, despite that, like there was just a dichotomy there that I felt constantly, right? I had my neighborhood friends who all look like me, Black and brown people, right, in my neighborhood who kind of grew up with similar circumstances. And then I had my school friends who none of them looked like me, right? And that went from, racially, religiously, all of the above. It was just drastically different. So for me, it was interesting to have to move between those two worlds. And that was something that I had done since a really young age. That was since first grade. So I think experiencing that really kind of opened my eyes to sort of the differences and what disparities that there are and kind of what causes those disparities. And a lot of times it's just perception and sort of what people assume based on who they're seeing in front of
Mm.
them, right? And that's the tough part for me because it's like, that to your next question, how did I kind of get into this space? That's a great question because the museum world is really, really, really difficult to get into. I have friends who have museum studies degrees that they graduated with their masters in 2018, 17, 16, and still just got a job in museums or still don't have a job in museums and are working internships. And I, just had really I honestly just was really blessed and really lucky because I knew the right people at Morgan who were able to help me to get my foot in the door in certain places. And that was really helpful. And really, to me, networking is everything. And it's about being able to network in sort of every community space that you're in.
Mm.
And that's something that for me has gotten me a really long way. But
Right.
what I never forget and never want to forget is that I can't forget where I came from, and I can't forget the community that I live in Northeast Baltimore, and I can't forget how people in my community and people in my community that I grew up in also belong in these spaces, right? No matter if
Absolutely.
they're sort of elite white spaces generally, and then the only sort of Black or subaltern stories that get told are the stories of maybe the civil rights movement, or maybe something about Harriet Tubman, since we're in Maryland, right? About
Right. Or something about extreme trauma. It's
exactly,
nothing about Black
exactly.
brilliance,
But
right?
there's Black brilliance, there's Black life, there's so much joy in Black life, particularly in Baltimore, that I
Mm-hmm.
just for example, walk with the doc, right? We experience that every week, and that to me is something that's so valuable, that is never highlighted in spaces that in spaces like museums, and that makes people feel like they don't belong and that their
Right.
stories aren't there. So that's really what I want to do. But really, how I got into those spaces, networking, and for me, it's like all about, people like to say, oh, we don't like nepotism, or, but that's really how anyone gets anywhere, in my
Right.
opinion. So it's really about who you know and who you kind of choose to reach out to and who you choose to speak to,
Right.
and how you sort of choose to present yourself. And I think that, not that you have to present yourself a certain way, but that you just have to be open and friendly and open to new relationships, because those relationships can really help you to kind of even figure out what you want to do. And, I
Right.
didn't know I wanted to go into museums, but a professor of mine at Morgan said, I think you'd really enjoy museum work. And I was like, oh, maybe, I don't know. So I
Mm-hmm.
did an internship that he helped me to get into. And then from there, he happened to be right. So I wouldn't have known if
So
I didn't
wait,
put
so
myself
do
up.
you know what it was that he recognized? What was it within you that he was like, museum work? Do you know what that switch
Um,
was or what that trait was?
that's a good question. I think for me, it's that I love history. That's something, like I said, even my family history and everything, and just studying my family history has always been something that I've been interested in.
Okay.
But I also love people, and I love interacting with people.
Hmm.
So I think museum work is unique in that it is really a place where you have historical artifacts, and you are really doing history, right? But it's like, rather than just rather teaching or history, or sitting and reading history and writing scholarly things all the time, it's more like you're kind of learning history out loud, in a
Right.
sense, right? So it's like I get to communicate with the public, and whether it's through an exhibition that I help to put on, or through a collection that I choose to collect for a particular museum, whatever that is, I'm able to communicate with the public through this history.
Right.
And I think my role in that is really to be able to bring in histories of people who are typically ignored. And I think, especially like with what you said, Quita, trying to get like a micro shelter into museums. I think that is a brilliant idea. And I think that that's something that museums should be thinking about, because that's something that's, a lot of museums now are not just history museums, but also for culture, right? So
Right.
even though it's happening now, that's still part of the culture of our city, or the culture of Maryland, right? So
Right.
that's part of history.
Right.
So I think that that is kind of where I play a role, in kind
Mhm.
of trying to bring in these histories that may not seem as quote unquote respectable, or whatever the case may be, that people kind of make excuses as to why not to highlight certain people, in certain communities. But I think it's important to bring those people into museum spaces so that we can kind of all be welcome.
Right. You know what that makes me think of, Chap? It gives me like, how could we highlight so many of the Baltimore bands that are always performing in like the band culture and capturing that? Because I think that that's a big deal for, a subset of folks that often aren't heard from.
Absolutely. There's people in Baltimore that when I tell them we're doing a battle of the marching bands, they're like, "Oh, what schools? What high school? What colleges?" I'm like, "No, neighborhood bands."
Right
You
here.
know,
Right.
right,
Right.
right. You know the there was like six. I should have had a list ready for this conversation just so I could make sure I shout them out. But there's neighborhood bands. EA North, Upton, Sandtown, Drew Heights. Everybody's got a neighborhood marching band, right? And to what you were saying, Camille, like I think that your professor saw probably a few things. He probably saw your love of history.
Oh,
He
yes.
saw your ability to network and blend into different communities because of how you grew up with the private school and in your community at home, and understanding that in this season in Baltimore, it is a historically significant season, and Quite often, me and Quida are very aware that when we're out in the community doing things, we are making history every time we hit the streets. We're part of cultivating Baltimore's culture and history every single day we're out here. And so I think all these things coming together, I'm sure that he saw that your passion for people, your passion for history, the space you were moving into or living in, he just saw, he probably just saw everything come together and say, this is what you need to be doing. And he, thankfully he shoved you in that direction, because quite frankly, like the past, few years that I've been out here serving, it's been very apparent that very unique things are happening in Baltimore. Very unique people are doing very unique things that are not being highlighted, because everyone wants to focus on the same old, same old. And if we move on beyond that, or move, yes, these things are happening, the violence and everything, but if we move past that, like look at all the amazing things that are going on. Like the um, like Queen, when in time has there been someone building little micro shelters for homeless people? Like never in history, right? Like, but
Not here in Baltimore, not that I know of, but
right, she's doing it.
right.
And even to like the parades that I've been privileged to be a part of on Pensy Ave, and now we're doing one down the harbor. Look back into history and look at Pennsylvania Avenue in 1946 when they had the first Cadillac parade, and in in the early 50s when they did the first Easter Day parade. Just in that one context alone of parades in Baltimore, there is like a deep, rich history, like 80-year-old history happening here that we're nodding to, and we're still continuing that tradition.
Right.
And it's so exciting and joyful to do these things and be a part of it.
Right. Like I think with Camille's set of skills, knowing that most often, like Chap, when's the last time you went to a museum? Like, I don't know folks that go.
I know I can say the every once in a while, all the kids a lot of the kids we mentor, they'll be like, hey, when's the next time we're going? They would they like to take the train down to DC.
Mm-hmm.
So probably twice a year, I'll save up enough money and take a handful of kids down to DC and hit whatever museums that are open, whatever they feel like doing, just to get them out of Baltimore, see
Mm-hmm.
something new. So I can say that in the last 6 months I've been to a couple of museums, but it's not part of my normal routine, right?
Right, because you're a mentor, it puts you in a position to almost have to expose folks. But if you're not a mentor, like when are you going to the museum? I remember being excited when Bank of America got a partnership with museums, and like the first Saturday was free or something like that, or there was a discount. And I was like, oh, this is great. And I would tell people, and they're like, and what am I going to go see? Like a bunch of old white men? And I'm like, oh, okay. Is that the only? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We might have a room, maybe, unless it's the Reginald F. Lewis Museum.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
Right.
so
And
Camille,
frankly,
go ahead.
That's sad, Quita. That's true, though, but that people aren't really wrong, when they say
Right.
that.
Nobody gets excited about it. But when I travel to other countries, like one of the first things we do is go to whatever famous museum. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
we start at the Louvre. We start at a cathedral. We start at something.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I need to do that in my own city, right?
Yeah.
But
And I'll say to even to our own cultures point, to the point of our own culture, like I know the guys who've been the primary organizers for the Pensy Ave parades that we do have been doing it almost a decade, and the people in charge of the marquee on the corner of it's on the corner. It's not on Dolphin, but like next to Robert C. Marshall, there's the old historic marquee. It's got the placards with some historical information about the community. But they had that old marquee, and not once did they ever acknowledge that we're doing a parade or put it up on the marquee so the neighborhood could know, hey, there's a parade this day, right? So like that's a problem. Like we are generating culture, we're generating tradition and history on the avenue, and the people that are in charge of those historic spaces aren't even recognizing or acknowledging that we're doing that. That's a problem.
Right.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, it's tough because then that's why these community connections are so important, but you can't pick and choose who you're in community with, right? It's not, oh, they look like, they can help me, or they look like they would be a good person to be buddy with or whatever it is, right? It's about getting to know your whole community, because your whole community has something to offer. Each and every
Right.
person has something to offer, and I feel like that's something that's missed.
Wow. Wow.
So often people, again, like, judge people by, they look at them and then they judge them immediately, and then either write them off or think they should go talk to them. And that's,
Wow.
the first step. And then for me, it's hard because sometimes I feel like when I'm meeting new people, I'm so shy, I don't know what to say.
Right.
But it's like I really have to force myself to just be like, hi, I'm Camille, and this is what I like to do, and what's your name, and what do you like, and
Yeah.
and too, it's also hard too, because I feel like for some people, it's like, so many times we go up to people and we're like, hi, where do you work, or what's your job, and that's such a loaded question. So I feel like
Right.
sometimes we just have to approach each other and say, what are you passionate about, what are your passions, what do you like to do,
Right.
rather than kind of going straight to this, like, capitalistic mindset where
Identifiers, right,
everything,
right.
yeah, why do you have
Like,
to think about,
what box can I put you in?
Mm, right.
Like, I don't want to be in
exactly,
any of your boxes. I'm
Well,
trying
like,
to define
I,
everything, because people love to ask, what do you do? I'm like, whatever it takes.
right,
Like, I can't even give you a title. Whatever it takes, Like,
exactly.
what
And
do
then
I
people are
need to do?
confused, and it's like, well, I don't have to be defined by a specific job that I do or don't do on a given day. But I think it's important to really get to know the community and get to know each other. And I think that's, for me, living in Northeast Baltimore, one of the best things was finding Bliss Meadows and Backyard Base Camp in Northeast Baltimore,
Yes.
in the Frankfurt community, because that's what got me into going to walk with the doc. And
Right. Shout out to
it just kind
Tia.
of snowballs from there. Like, you get to meet so many people, and my husband and I, when we feel like taking a walk and maybe it's too hot to go around the lake, well, we can go to Bliss Meadows and walk
Yeah.
in the woods, and that's really nice, and it's 5 minutes away, not even 5 minutes away, and
Right.
that's a community resource. These are all community resources that people don't even know about.
look,
And
I grew up in Northeast Baltimore, and until I went to walk with a doc, I had no idea we had an urban farm over Frankfurt and Bel Air Road.
And it's 10 acres, y'all.
yeah,
Like,
What?
how do you miss 10 acres, right? Like,
Goats and chickens and
yep.
sheep and what?
It's really incredible. Yeah, it's
yeah.
really incredible. But I really think these community connections and sort of getting everyday people into museum spaces will allow, kind of, rather than, I feel like so often our stories are told by other people who are not a part of the community. And it's like,
Mm,
well,
mm.
why do you get to tell my story? I can tell my own story,
Well,
Right.
and I think too, some of the people we celebrate, in like, let's take Harriet Tubman for an example.
Mhm.
At the time, she was just a regular person. She was just fed up, and she's doing what she had to do. Right? She wasn't like, obvious. I mean, I'm pretty sure I wasn't there, so I can't say, obviously, but I'm pretty sure that she was just a regular person, helping people
Mhm.
out, doing the right thing, and wasn't celebrated for what she did until well past,
Right,
the time she died. And now we recognize her and celebrate her. But
right.
that's your point. To your point, like, regular people make history.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's for her, for her
Yeah.
sake, it's too late now. Well, she was alive, she was a fugitive, right? So
Right.
that's not, I mean, that's not really a fair. And now we're like, oh, thank you so much. And it's like, okay, but, give people their roses while they're still here. So I think definitely bringing people into museum spaces and the community into museum spaces, so that the community can start to tell their own stories, so that we can tell our own stories,
Yes.
and I think that that's an important piece. And to your point too, the battle of the bands and everything it's all a part of what a museum is. A public history experience, right? It's not just supposed to be statues of white men, right? It's supposed to be a public history experience. So when you come into that space, there are events, there are opening events for exhibitions, and when there are those opening events, museums invite bands, right? And that happens. Museums can block off streets and do a parade. That's possible. So why not
Oh, wait a
invite into
minute.
the community to allow those things to happen, right? So I think that's kind of where my role comes in, and that's really what I'm trying to do,
Hmm.
and make space for that, because and just do as much community. connecting with the community as I can, particularly in kind of my area in Northeast Baltimore, but then also, just throughout the city. And again, like I said, Quida, throughout Maryland, because there's several museums in Maryland, right? There's another other outside of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, there's also the Banneker Douglas Museum in Annapolis, right? So that's also a Black History museum that, we can kind of leverage that and kind of build more space for community in spaces
Right.
like that. But yeah, that's really what I'm passionate about. That's what I do, so to speak.
But
But
still, Camille, like all the ideas that you are giving, like I don't think we would have ever considered, hey, museum, Reginald F. Lewis Museum, do you want to be a part of this parade that we're having in August to celebrate these bands at blah, 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 blah. You know what? Who would have thought that that would even be something, not to say that they're going to say yes each and
right.
every time or
But
yes
it's
at
possible,
all,
and why
but
not?
what? I would have never thought.
Well,
Like I would have thought that's
and I'm
way too hoity-toity for like, out in these streets, literally. Girl, please.
and I'm still marinating on the regular people tip, right? Because like just for Baltimore history and Maryland history, I when I have a goal or something I'm working on, for instance, for selling trying to sell the parade to get some people interested in supporting. I did research, and some of the greatest context and the greatest information I got wasn't what was documented and dated, but it was like Dr. Ken Davis, who's he's an internationally known organist who grew up in that community, and he's telling me about the heyday of the Cadillac parades in 1950s Pensy Ave, and then I got Yusef, my brother Yusef, over at Chase Towers, and he's telling me about the 70s and stuff and what it was like then, and so you have these dates and times that are for whoever decided are historically significant, but the people that were there packing in the context, just the regular people, when we talk about I don't know. We talk about like a lot of times politics comes up, and we have like Mayor Donald Schaefer, and then like I got a community of old guys who worked for him, and they're giving you the real deal on on our context on what was happening along the way, or even with our more modern politicians like the mayors, going from like D'Alessandro to all the way to Pugh and Brandon Scott now. Just if you have relationships with people in the community and you're talking to people who grew up with them or who know their aunties and all this other stuff, then like
Right.
you see one thing that's portrayed as historical or newsworthy information, but then when you see the whole context, you get a much more fulfilling picture of your community around you and what the culture really is.
Absolutely.
I think that
Absolutely.
it's so true. But to Camille's point, just talking to people, right?
Yeah,
Like building relationships and making sure
relationship.
that you aren't doing whatever you're doing by yourself with your head down because you're going to miss something or someone. And then more importantly, like we have to recognize that unless you're like intentionally being inclusive, just the way that the world works systemically, it is going to be like this whiteness, like existing, whatever it is, whatever we're talking about. So, white, male, straight, all these things that aren't necessarily everybody. So we have to be intentional about being inclusive of Black folks, Native American folks, Asian folks. You know what I mean? Like all of the everybody's, all of the different countries in Africa. Like the world is so huge, and just thinking about who is it that we could possibly be isolating? Oh, what about people who I wish that we had someone who was doing American Sign Language each time, but that costs because I looked into it. That's how I know. You know what I mean? Like I would love
I
to be
know
more
I know
inclusive.
a guy. I know a guy if we want to do that. I know a guy.
Listen, I would love to be more inclusive. Even when like I'm looking to get into school spaces, I'm like, hey, maybe I can pull Blanca along and we can do this in Spanish as well. Like, because when I visit these schools, it's almost a few kids that look like, okay, are you even engaging? Do you understand the words that we're saying? Like, is somebody going to check on you? Why aren't they? You know what I mean? And then even when I try to engage, you're like, I'm like,
Or no, now that you said that, you got my wheels turning. Because Camille, since 2015, really 2010, there has been such a significant increase in Latino community in
Hmm.
Baltimore.
Hmm.
Who's documenting that history, man? Besides Bayview, who's manipulating the masses, or the city, Baltimore City Police, who's documenting like crime stats. Like,
Right.
who's really capturing and documenting the history that is just like melding into Southeast Baltimore? Because I had the privilege to serve over there for several years, and I'm still plugged in over there. And um, through COVID, I was really immersed into the culture and all the many different countries that represent the Latino community over there. And there is such rich culture
Yeah.
and such a rich people over there, and I think they're looked at more as a problem and marginalized than really celebrated and saying, "Welcome to the city." Like, look, let's really look at these people through a different lens.
Hmm.
I hate to say these people. That's my white guy moment.
No, but no, listen,
but
if we
seriously,
treat people like people, right?
yeah.
Like treat them
Hmm.
like human beings. These people are human beings, and treating folks like human
And
beings.
like
But
yeah,
Chad,
and their family, bro. I'm gonna tell you, like their family over there.
Chad, what? Listen, as a black woman, when the Dominican hair shop started popping up, and I didn't have to go way over.
Hey,
Chad, like this was happy. I was like, wait, my sisters are here. Please come blow this hair out, girl. Like, so when you say that they're family, I need you to understand like there's levels to how
Yeah,
you know what I mean. There are connections all over the place. So go ahead,
absolutely.
Chad. I was like, woo,
no. So
there's
that's
two.
I think that's a projected. I think that's a project, man. Let's tie in over there and see who's down to start capturing some of the culture
Yeah.
over there and really capture the stories before they're gone. Because I know some of the more negative history of why that community is congregating in those zip codes, because they've been offered free maternity care back in 2010 or 2015 and around that time, and how programs grew out of that for free health care for undocumented citizens. That's great and that's well and good, but it's also a double-edged sword. Though I'm not. This ain't a political show. We're not going to talk about it, but I think all of the context needs to be captured so everyone gets the whole picture, and that the data doesn't get manipulated to tell a narrative that's untrue.
Right, because we know how data is easily manipulated. It's
We
like,
do.
who is it coming from, and who did you really talk to? Was that a great population? I'm so sick of seeing these one-sided things to support Roe versus Wade, and it's like we asked all these single women, we asked all these divorced couples,
Hmm.
and it's like,
Well,
what about all the everybody else? Why are
Right.
you talking to this specific subset of people?
Right.
What is happening
and
here?
I'll say as a client, to your arena, Camille, as a client and a patron of a museum, I love museums. I love taking kids because it puts information in a fuller context,
Hmm.
and it's so important. Like for instance, with the abortion stuff, the stat was 64% of um, Black American homes didn't have a dad, and I would argue that no. 64% of the homes, the dads aren't on a marriage certificate where you're drawing your data. But I can tell you over 100% of the dads are in people's lives, because if you're, I can tell you that, because if your dad's not around, you got me.
Right.
And the kids out here know that. Like, we did a father son basketball game on Friday in McCullough Homes with Coach Coach Dagana Duncan, Robert C. Marshall Rec Center, Officer Chuck Lee, Officer Gillespie was out there, and we had more dads than kids show up because we knew that there was kids coming without dads, right? So that data doesn't tell the whole context. In
Right.
that example
Doesn't tell the
alone,
whole
like that
story.
example alone,
Yeah.
um, so
Absolutely.
museums are good for that. Museums are good for filling in the gaps of
There's
information,
context. Yeah.
retelling the story. Sure.
Absolutely. And, I think to your points as well, both of you, but Quita, I know you mentioned too, is like we have to be welcoming of all communities. And,
Mm,
Chap, to your point too, all sorts of families. Families don't all look the same with married mom and dad. And, and not every
Right.
family looks the same. So it's not fair to kind of boil something down to a statistic that doesn't tell the full story. So
Right.
that's, like you said, where museums can kind of help to fill in those gaps. But I think it's also very important to recognize too, Quita, that this these welcoming spaces aren't only for, the white spaces. We Black people in our Black spaces also sometimes have issues being welcoming. And
Yeah,
I was speaking to someone about this the other day, a friend of mine, and she and I were like, we love being in Black spaces, and we're talking about it. And we were both like, yeah, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. And it's like, yeah, but sometimes it's hard, because if someone brings something up that I don't agree with and I'm in a Black space, you don't want to ruin that experience. You don't want to taint that environment, right? And you don't want an argument in a space that is sacred, right? So it's like,
Mm.
what do I do? Do I say how I feel? Especially if, say, we're talking about the queer community, right? Or say we're talking about Latinos, right? Or say, there's a lot that goes into sort of anti-Blackness, but that anti-Blackness is fed into the Black community as well. So there's
right.
a lot of
Camille.
anti-Blackness and, stuff that comes out of the Black community that is intolerance, right? And that's tough, because we have to kind of, it goes both ways. It goes kind of in every direction. But then
Yeah,
we also have to remember too, Chap, a lot of times in Latino communities and in Asian communities too, there's a lot of anti-Blackness, right? So that's also something that we have to think about and have to figure out how to bring those communities in as well to the conversation about how we can all combat anti-Blackness and kind of all the stereotypes that come with it, that have kind of created the society where we're kind of all butting heads, and we don't
right,
have to. And
right.
we really,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, we've been out here working, Quida and I and our other partners, and we recognize that there's actually unity in our diversity, right? Because what I can't do, Quita does. What she doesn't do well, Sheldon probably does. What Sheldon doesn't do, Quandra may be fit to do quite well. And so, you know, everybody has a uniqueness to them. Every single personality has a uniqueness to them. And when you get a group of people like her, Voltrina, like me, Lou, and Donnie and Chuck, we got Voltron on the flip side, right? And we you synergize with certain people, then you guys, you know, Quita can speak to it. Things get done, and it's
Right.
because
Well,
you
Chad,
recognize that you're not all the same, but you
you
stand in the
still
gap
move
for each other.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, you add to it. Like me and Donnie have a love hate relationship when it comes to speaking about people who are unhoused. He lives in a block that has a ton of vacants. So those vacants are often a nuisance on his block. So I understand that. However, that's not my experience, right? Like I want to build
Mm.
micro shelters and tiny homes for folks who are unhoused. So we bring something
Mm.
different to the table. And I'm like, well, I see your problem as an opportunity to change someone's life, right? Like you see it as an opportunity to complain, and that's cool. I get that.
It's
You're
valid.
allowed to have those emotions,
It's
right?
Valid.
valid. Yeah.
Yes.
But now let's move forward to a solution so that you don't have that problem anymore, and we
Mhm.
can figure out how to house these people, get them out of your community as a nuisance, but they need housing. So if this is where the roof is and they find warmth here, I can't be mad at that because
Right.
people need shelter, right?
Right.
So there's that thing. So I feel like I bring that energy. So Camille, even when people are like, who is this Black woman? Where did she come from? I'm like, hold up. Why are y'all Xing out these people that aren't here to
Mm.
speak for themselves?
Right.
Like Chap has seen me do that. We're often I'm speaking around men, right? Like especially when we're doing volunteer stuff and we're using tools. And I'm like, hey guys, like we can't, I don't want you talking about your sons and how you're going to be disappointed if this is who their preference is and what clothes they want to wear. Because guess what? If that is your son and that is what your son loves, I pray to God that you would be the family member that would give them support, because this world is not going to give them anything, right?
Right.
And we don't want our children to hurt. So continue to think about that as you spew this whatever rhetoric it is. Like Chap's
Yeah.
been there, and I'm like, hold up, wait,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
pop, pop,
Yeah.
pop. Don't. I hear you, and I may not have children, but I see what is happening
Yeah.
to these children and the adults that they grow up to be. Like,
Yeah.
Mm.
let's start
Absolutely.
there too. Like, so many
Well,
seniors who are of the LGBTQ plus community
Mhm.
and just pretending to be heterosexual. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, your whole
Mhm.
lives, these are seniors, elders. Like,
Yep.
so go ahead, Chap. I'm sorry.
No, you know what? You got so many thoughts going off my brain right now, but I did want to say that Quandra trying to start a whole another hour long conversation with this, talking about taking art out of the schools. Don't do
Yeah.
that, because we'll talk about that all day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
but to her point, is there a way to try to expand this into different school systems? I don't know if this is
yeah,
something
you
that
know
could be
what? COVID,
virtual or
or
curriculum. Go
even
ahead, Chap.
even field trips. Like I had my man's Ahmed Najari over at PS228 in Greektown. He acknowledged that they didn't go on a field trip for 2 years because of COVID. And when they finally this year were able to go on a field trip, I don't think they were going to a museum or anywhere like fun and educational. They're going to like Hershey Park type stuff. And he was trying to raise money to make sure that everybody in his class could afford to go on that field trip, because it
Mhm.
wasn't like they were going to a local museum, which is more reasonable in cost. They were
Mhm.
traveling to like Six Flags or Busch Gardens or some crap and
Right.
paying $60 to like have a garbage day on rides, right? Like,
Right,
like I'm not a
right.
roller coaster guy, so I could care less about that stuff. But then if you stick me in like, I'm an old school Air and Space Museum nerd. I
Mhm.
like to be in the IMAX. I like to put my hands on stuff at the old Maryland Science Center. The I think there's some kind of innovations museum in DC we went to last time, where those hovercrafts that you see in the Avengers movie,
Mhm.
they have those,
Oh
and
wow.
they're giant drones that carry like one or two passengers. And in certain testing cities right now in the real world, you can go on your phone and order the little Avengers taxi. It'll meet you right at your point. It'll go up in the air and take you directly to your destination and drop you off. That's a real thing that's like in the world right now. But who knows about that? Except that I took a bunch of kids to this innovation museum, and they had a little demonstration and had an actual working model there. And I was like I'm living in like iRobot. Like I'm living in the future right now. It's crazy.
And Chap too, what's hard, and I want to kind of get to what Quandra just asked as well, because what's difficult is that not only are we kind of perpetually divesting from schools and
Mm,
children in our city who will be the future of the city, but we have to remember too, they don't have transportation. They don't even have school buses to go to school, so how are they
Right,
supposed to get to a field trip, right?
right,
So we are, and I love the big ideas, because trust me, I'm that way too, and I think that way too. But kind of to Quandra's question, there's another opportunity with museums, and that's virtual tours and virtual
right,
field trips.
boom.
A lot of museums do virtual field trips and virtual tours, especially since COVID. And it's not fair because it's not accessible. A lot of field trips are not accessible to Baltimore City students because transportation is expensive. It's not easy to get a bus to carry 100 kids. That's not easy.
right.
And usually more than 100 kids, right? So that's what, 3, 4 buses. And that's not inexpensive, especially in a city that doesn't provide school buses in the first place,
And our
right?
regular bus system is poo poo.
Exactly. Exactly. In addition to that, right? And say they want to go outside of the city a little bit, or say, then it's not even an option to take public transportation, right?
Right.
So I think that is another option to give students the opportunity to sort of experience it in their own classroom. And there's so much that goes into it. And that's also something that I'm passionate about, because I was a teacher in the city for a couple of years before I went back to school.
Ooh.
So
And
I
so, how do you feel
definitely,
about the digital equity aspect? Because I'm wondering, like, yes, that'll be great while they're in school, but if they wanted to do something more afterward, how many kids are actually going to be able to tap
yeah.
into that resource?
It's really hard because not many, right? So there are a
Okay.
few schools. I worked in high school, so that's kind of more where my knowledge base is. But there are a few high schools that have sort of one-to-one for technology, where students can take their laptops home. But that is like very few.
Rare,
I can only, think of 3 or 4 off the top of my head
rare,
of
right,
city high schools, right? So most students, and that was the issue during COVID too, with the learning loss, because so many
right,
students didn't have, I mean, a laptop, internet, let alone a laptop, right?
right. Yes,
So, and then there's so much about it, but the internet that was provided for quote unquote for free was so slow. And if you have one sibling in your
So
household, then
slow.
nobody can use the internet.
Right.
So, and it's like so many times we're like, oh, this is making it accessible, but then there's so many roadblocks that aren't making those things work.
Right.
So, to Quandra's point, there are virtual field trip options and there are virtual tours at a lot of museums these days. But that digital equity or digital inequity really makes it really difficult to kind of provide an opportunity for all city students.
Right.
Um,
How
yeah,
about
Yeah.
so now you got my wheels turning. We only got a couple minutes left, but you got my wheels turning like the making good in our community park, right? How about bringing exhibitions to communities?
yep. That is
Yeah. I mean,
also,
we
yeah.
always create our own space. Like that is you.
He's got a great spot for it. The kids over there are beautiful, man. Like from like knee high to like 18 and older. Like there's just a solid group of kids that are in that space all the time.
And then the
Yeah.
best part about it is it's already in the community. We're not worried about these stupid buses because why wouldn't you have
Right.
Right,
the fact?
right.
I've always complained about that. Like when I was in high
Thank
school,
you.
I'm like, how do the city schools not have yellow buses? Like how these kids get? I don't understand.
It
But
makes no
okay,
sense.
yeah, that never makes any sense. But Camille, like Chap said, we have less than 5 minutes. You are amazing. I need to know if folks are like, I have an idea, or I need Camille's help to get my art or my story, or like, how would people work with you or find you? How does that happen?
That's a great question. So, is there a way I can put my email in the chat or something
Yeah,
for people
Yep.
to see, or I can put it in the comments after? Either way, but
put it
my
in the
email
comments.
address.
That way everybody can see
Okay,
it. And whenever they watch it, all they got to do is scroll through the comments like, okay, that's how I get in touch with Camille.
so I'll do that after. But for anyone
Yeah.
who's listening now, my email address is Camille. My first name, it's Michelle with one L, Michele, the number 3 @gmail.com. And that's how you can reach me. I also can give my phone number. However, yep, that's it. Whoever wants to reach me, please feel free to reach out. This is something that, again, I'm passionate about. And I love to work with people. I love to talk to people. And I also want to hear about what you all are doing in the community, because that gives me big ideas, because there are just so many things that I'm passionate about. But really, it's about racial and community equity within our city. So I really would love to hear from anyone.
I love that. I love that. And we're all about collaboration. And yes, Quandra, please come out to walk with a doc every Sunday, Lake Montebello. You'll probably see one of these repeat offenders there, Chap, Quandra. I'm sorry, Chap or Camille. And Quandra, you're always chiming in, so it'll be great to meet you. That'll be exciting. All right, so Camille, we know how to get in touch with you. You're going to put your email in the comments. Chat popped it up there. Chap, do you have any last words or anything to say?
That's it right there. That's what I
All
got.
right. And say the date again. When is it?
So
Saturday?
yep, back to school Battle of the Bands Parade and Power Fest Festival, August 20th, 11 to 5 p.m. We have the flyer out on social media, so you guys can get in contact with us. You can check our social media; it'll be on there. But if you got dance groups, we're gonna have a stage and dance competition. We got local performing artists. You got vendors. You got bands, marching bands. You got brass bands. I don't care. Whatever you do, you do parades. Call us because we are taking over the harbor in spite of Baltimore City. Hopefully with their blessing, but we don't care. We're doing it anyway. Y'all know the Baltimore vibes, so just hook up with us and be part of the problem, and let's have a blast.
All right, y'all. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see you next Monday at 7:05. Bye, guys. Thanks, Camille.